Welcome back to the ME Dialogue, where we discuss the impact of the US-Iran war on insurance in the region. My name is Zaki, and today I am joined by Mr. Peter Englund, Senior Executive Officer, Commercial Insurance Middle East for Zurich Insurance. Thanks for joining us today, Peter.
Thanks for having me, Saki.
So, Peter, why don't you start by giving us a brief rundown on how the insurance market has been affected by the war, specifically within the GCC region?
Well, if we look primarily on the coverage side, as you know, Saki, the war exclusion is a standard feature on most policies. So normally, unless it's been written specifically or taken out or addressed either under a PV sort of coverage or a possible extension, mainly on the marine policies, or as a standalone, say, PV coverage, is normally excluded. So in that essence, while it's being pursued and looked at, it's not something that normally would be covered. So in that essence, you can argue that from an impact standpoint, the industry as such has proven to be quite resilient. But having said that, though, there is still an obligation on the industry behalf to look at these damages, obviously, and stay very close to the customers, many of whom are indeed very much impacted. What we're seeing on the production side so far, the production has held up remarkably well. There are some areas that we believe in the short term would be very much sort of impacted. I'm thinking about things like offshore construction, for instance, where I would expect truly from a production standpoint that's being impacted, but also construction in general, where some of these projects are now, due to maybe the uncertainty, are being kind of put at hold until we get further clarity on what's going to happen next. So the industry, we've seen some number come out on the region in general. Of course, there is an impact in terms of claims. There is a number of notifications coming through. We're staying close to these customers. In terms of, from a bottom line standpoint, the industry has proven to be quite resilient. There are some clear question marks on the production side, particularly, and the rates, it's fair to comment on the rates as well, have proven to, despite all the turbulence and despite maybe with some reservations when it comes to these war extensions and in the PV space, the rates continue to be quite competitive as well.
So Zurich itself is a kind of an expert in specialty lines. I'm thinking specifically energy and construction, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
So within these two lines, like marine, energy, and construction, how has Zurich's own business been affected? What are you able to share with us about how Zurich is doing in these lines?
Everyone is in a very energy dependent region, right? Everyone is in some shape or form impacted from, say, any kind of disruption in the energy space. And surely with the events now, in that respect, very much focused on the Strait of Hormuz, obviously has a huge impact. So until further notice, though, as I said, we still can see that the business is, from a production standpoint, on a short-term basis, managing quite well. We are still commercially seeing very, very aggressive, still very competitive rates on the energy side, but it's still holding up remarkably well. They're going forward, though, on the energy side, there are some clear question marks when it comes to offshore construction. And this will then have to be offset by potentially other regions, right? Not necessarily GCC focused in the short term. And as I said, the overall impact, there is obviously a link here into the energy is vital for the region at large. And we could see potential mega projects being paused and maybe some repriorities as well, given the fact that macros and the market environment in general is kind of changing as a result of this conflict. But having said that, we're very mindful, we're bullish for the long term. We think that we've always been amazed with this region's ability to fight back. A lot of the long-term strategic initiatives that we have in place remain the same, and we are keen to take part of that and be part of that journey and to continue to give back to a region that has been very good to us.
You mentioned long-term strategies, right? Which leads right into my next point. What do you think the long-term implications of this war and all of the things that came around with it, including the closing of the Strait of Hormuz and the implications, the impacts of energy supply around the world? Do you think there'll be a long-term impact on how the industry treats war-related risks?
I think we will definitely have to maybe have a look at how we address this. I do believe that the current kind of tools that we have available, or current products and services that we provide, either as potential extensions on the marine side, standalone PV kind of coverage or SRCC on the property side provide a great deal of extensions. War itself as a right is indeed, for various reasons, is tricky to quantify for the markets. So I think that's something that we will have to bear in mind. But then you can also approach it from a service, from a resilience standpoint as well.
Right.
And I think that's where the region can do significantly, or where the industry can do significantly more. So in terms of the new balance, I do believe once we reach to a conclusion, we will have to consider new potential energy routes. I think this conflict would also raise a demand and interest in alternative energy sources like renewables, for instance. But I do believe that the region at large will, and as some of the statement has been, cannot be so dependent on, say, one route alone. I think there will have to be alternative routes. I'm thinking about the Eastern pipeline, for instance, one of them. I'm thinking about other ways of exporting the oil and energy as well. So I think all these things have to be looked at. The problem, as you know, is the fact that this will take some time. And it will also take not tens, but maybe hundreds and billions of dollars in investments. But again, that's where we can support, and that's where we as an industry also have a role to play.
Right. Okay. You mentioned one thing earlier, just a bit about the industry's responsibility and role in like improving resilience and sustainability in the region. Can you elaborate a bit more on that point?
Now, I think in general, what you've seen lately, Saki, is that we've been very much focused on products, and what you will see is that the industry, both on the carrier side, but also on the distribution side, will be way more focused on services going forward. Long term, how do we build a more sort of resilient kind of societies? How do we help proactively address some of these concerns, whether it be catastrophic related or weather related? And I think that's also what you will see from a financial standpoint. It also provides alternative revenue stream for the industry as well, if we can make it work, and hopefully by being very relevant to our customers and the societies in which we operate in. The products are one thing, but they are not the entire solution. It's about being relevant. It's about valuable relationship with your customers and the societies in which you operate in.
So right now, Peter, as of time of recording, right, on 8th April, a 2-week ceasefire has just been announced by both Iran and the US, which will hopefully lead to a longer-term peace. Do you think there'll be an immediate response from the industry to the ceasefire, or are they more likely to wait and see and be patient?
I think you have to make distinctions between signals and noise, and without putting too much judgment into it. But I do believe that there's a lot of noise out there.
Yeah.
And I think the industry will respond to clear signals. And I think people will probably wait and get more certainty before they kind of decide that everything is kind of done and dusted. Looking at the oil price this morning, as you know, as we speak, the oil price have come down significantly based on these announcements. So we're looking at oil again in the mid-90s space, which is a somewhat good sign. But having said that, the most critical commercial solution, where everyone has to decide what they believe is a workable solution going forward, is again comes down to the Strait of Hormuz and the potential agreement, kind of commercial agreement in that respect, when I think short to mid-term when it comes to the energy that kind of passes through there on a day-to-day basis. So short term, I think maybe for a full-on ceasefire, I think that's a bit too optimistic to hope for. What I do hope for a ceasefire, but also focusing on getting to the negotiation table when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz and getting to some kind of workable commercial agreement there. I think that's what a sort of a solution could look like for the region and the world at large.
Just one thing you said interested me is about signals versus noise, and that how there's a lot of noise around this war. And I think noise will continue to play a big part in a lot of things around the world. And as an insurer, how do you make sure to not be distracted by noise and focus on the real things?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Zaki, because it calls for integrity, it calls for discipline at times, and it calls for education as well and understanding, and you have to use your own experience. But I think it's a combination. Obviously, you need to look at where the market is heading and what's going on. But while doing so, look at the data, look at what the data tell you to do. But equally, as an industry, you have to sort of maintain a very opportunistic and commercial mindset as well. You can't be terrified, right? There's a lot of things
Yeah.
that needs to be done. A lot of clients that are in a difficult situation that are dependent on our products and services as well. So you have to be able to look at it both ways, right? In the end, we are very much focused on sort of the geopolitical scene and what's going on. But in the end time, we also have customers that need to be served. We have commercial interests. They're not necessarily all the time aligned, right?
Yeah.
So coming back to your question about energy, obviously now the energy is in scope. We're looking at that particularly in terms of on the construction side. We're looking in terms of rates, and we're looking at the assets themselves. But at the same time, this could potentially be offset with some premiums that will come from potential war extensions, potential PV coverage as well, and other lines of business as well. So there's always a balance, right? I think it's about looking at what we can do to stay relevant. And again, as I said, with some clear question marks towards the later part of the year. But I'm very proud of the fact that the industry and we as a team has remained and proven to be so resilient, even at times like this. So that gives us confidence.
So those question marks you mentioned, the ones coming late the end of the year, how are you planning to deal with those? Is it going to be another wait and see type situation? Do you already have a strategy in place?
I think more important now, it's important that you have a strategy in place, right? Remember, we still operate in a market with very good fundamentals, and whatever you lack in terms of growth, maybe you see that there's still low insurance penetration across the GCC in many markets. There are a lot of segments. We are talking about the large corporate segment right now, but still you need to have propositions in place when it comes to the SME business as well. You need to look at how you can expand across the region, right, with your physical presence as well, potentially. So I think at times like these are potentially some things that you need to fast track, right? So it's about what are the other kind of strategies that we have in place, and maybe now calls for a time to kind of fast track these, particularly for us. More actively towards the mid-market and SME segments,
right.
And also while expanding the many products that we have in place, the product proposition, if you wish, and adding more products to our clients.
What about reinsurance and how they've been reacting to this war, right? Is capacity still existent? Have rates changed in any way?
I think based on what we can see from the big renewals lately in the reinsurance space, that the capacity is very much out there. It's still a very competitive space. We're seeing discipline, but yet there is an underlying tone of aggressiveness there. We're seeing rate reductions in many lines of businesses. Going into the conflict, for instance, financial lines was particularly soft for us.
Yep.
Even cyber was very soft. And again, as I say, both in terms of the traditional reinsurance capital, there's still plenty of capacity out there.
I imagine your cyber policies also have a war exclusion within them?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Do your political violence products have a cyber warfare inclusion?
Normally they do, yeah.
Can you expand a bit more on those products, specifically the cyber warfare bit, right? I think it's becoming more and more relevant these days.
If we go back to the war exclusion, right, while this can be discussed at times, many times it is indeed a standard exclusion for many reasons. So in the property space, they do also apply in the cyber space. What I think has been tricky when it comes to the cyber, I think the main discussion point there has been, when is cyber state-sponsored kind of terrorism, and when is it not? And that's led to some of the big kind of cases that we've seen, not necessarily here in the region, but also in courts in say in the US. So, but having said that, though, these situations call for an increased awareness when it comes to cyber, right? With that kind of discussion happening or not, it calls for maybe clarity in that regard. But still, we're seeing continued interest in this kind of growing line of business. The cyber market in the region is remarkably small, to the tunes of 50 plus million US dollars and growing. But that then should be put in relative to economic losses that are running globally, as you know, in the trillions of US dollars every year. And also significant losses here in the region. So I think for that reason, and along with the conflict and the kind of increased threat, you would expect this line of business to grow significantly. You can see that here in the DFC as well, with a lot of MGAs and new interests, particularly in the cyberspace.
So, how does Zurich itself approach the question of whether a cyber attack is state-sponsored or not?
We just provide as much clarity as we can on terms of wording, right? When
Mm-hmm.
there has to be a discussion there with the underwriter, but I think the main important thing is that the starting point is very clear to the clients what is being covered and what is not. And I think we're doing that by providing relevant both products and services, but also very clear language in that regard. And then obviously if that's then not sufficient, there are alternatives way of addressing this as well, right? Or potentially trying to bridge the gap as much as possible.
What do you think is the worst case scenario to come out of this war?
What we're seeing, I believe, to some extent, is being attacked is not only building and strategic assets across the region. What we are seeing being attacked is this idea of the Middle East and particularly Dubai and some of the neighboring financial hubs like Riyadh as well, as financial centers, as locations of where we see growth, where we see entrepreneurial spirits, where we see thriving societies, and where we see safety. And this is what's being kind of attacked, right? For many reasons. The worst case is obviously that we allow this to impact us in our decision, and maybe that we're more defensive and that we are lacking in terms of our commitment to the region and what we are set out to do. I think that's the worst case, along with obviously huge the human impact as well. I mean that's where it starts. But having said that, though, I know that the region and the countries that I've mentioned will never allow that to happen. And I think we will have to live through this turbulence, thinking that there will be at least a viable solution, whether we call it peace or whether we call it some kind of commercial agreement, whatever we say, but something that eventually will mean that we will get back to some kind of normality and get on with things again and get into a growth mode, because this region should indeed very much be about growth, right? Let's not forget, very good fundamentals. It was among the most kind of growing advanced economies just a couple of years back in the world. And as long as we can get to some kind of solution here, I'm sure we will get back to growing again.
Are you all still based in the DFC? Your team is still here?
The team's here. Obviously, we allow for flexibility at times like these. We're here in the DFC and the office is open and we're operating as normal.
Right, and I assume this is also part of you showing your commitment to the region to stay
100%. 100%. We, as I said, we are very grateful. We think the region here has been extremely good to us, and we have an obligation to give back, and we remain very grateful.
Okay, so Peter, thank you very much for your time. It's been a great interview. It's been great talking to you. Yeah, thank you once again for joining us here at the Middle East Dialogue, and we'll see you next week.
See you soon. Thank you.